Hey, everybody. Welcome to the People, Purpose, and Profits Business Coaching Podcast. My name is Brian Buck, and my wonderful co-host is
Kat.
And I am so excited to bring to you Sabrina, who has been a friend for quite a few years on LinkedIn. We've had some conversations, and now you guys get to listen into the great conversations we have. So, Sabrina, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, first, thank you both, Kat and Brian, for inviting me to be a part of the conversation. I'm Sabrina Moon. I lead an organization called the Problem Solving Institute. And as you could guess from the name of it, yes, I love problem solving. A very hefty, lean CI background, which led me to starting that business in about 2017. So on occasion, I teach people problem solving skills in line with some popular CI methodologies, but my primary focus in my work right now is doing a lot of leadership development centered on Brene Brown's research. So I'm one of her certified Dare to Lead facilitators. So I teach a lot of leaders and organizations how to have hard conversations. So that's the gist of what I do primarily. That's what consumes all my Zoom time and some of my face-to-face time. So nice to meet you all.
Yeah, thank you. So I always like to kick this off. So our show, we serve small businesses, medium-sized businesses. That includes independent consultants, coaches that are starting to grow and scale their business. And we like to focus on the balance between people, purpose, and profits, because you need all three to be successful. You want to maybe share a little bit about what those three mean to you, or is in the coaching that you do with leaders or in your own personal entrepreneurial journey, is one of those three just a bigger focus or shining brighter for you right now?
Yeah, I think it's such a great question. So when I think of that triangle, I think about one of those legs getting knocked out and really things can get screwy in a hurry, right? So when I think about where I am now and where I was 3 years ago, completely different. I would say I was hyper focused on my purpose when I initially started my business, which I knew the people side of continuous improvement and process improvement was something I was really passionate about and was frequently centering on in the leadership roles I had. So that really kind of pushed me to jump off the cliff and figure out how to build the parachute on the way down. So, the first year was like that. And then I really started bumping into, oh crap, I need to figure out the profit side of this, from being a business owner. Like, how do I really do all these things I don't have good skills with, such as marketing and sales and writing proposals? Like, I didn't know I needed to do all that. So, I had to figure that out quickly, but I also had to figure out how to help anyone that I was working focus on their profit too, because really it's all about adding value. Why hire me if there's not going to be value? And at the end of the day, I would say people has probably been the most prevalent, and I think it's always going to be. That's such an important focus for me, even in the roles that I've had with other organizations and in my company. Honestly, I would not be a good CEO if I didn't look at sales and revenue and profit of my own business. But I'll tell you, I don't really a lot. I'm not looking at my P&L a lot because I want to meet the needs of the people that I'm serving. And naturally, sales and profit just come as a result because I'm so focused on what their needs are. And there's a lot of needs right now, especially in leadership. People are trying to figure out how to have hard conversations right now. And it's hard. So they need a little support. So people side's definitely the leg I'm really focused on. Good question.
I love that. Yeah. Well, you also make me think of something in my entrepreneurial journey. I'm glad I learned early, but oh my goodness, if somehow this could be a message for everybody who dreams of owning a business, is not only have your passion and your superpowers, which we all care about, like I love to coach, I love to this, we also have to recognize we're also salespeople. And I think so often we think they're two separate things, but man, once you learn that not only is our superpower skill we need, but the sales.
Yeah.
People don't, we get all about the passion. So anyway, I appreciate you sharing that journey, because that was something that definitely was a challenge for me that I'm glad I learned earlier. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, when I think about what you just shared, I don't know about you, but my relationship with sales and that word was not very healthy.
Yeah.
So, and I see Kat like kind of like,
Yeah, that's what I work with coaches on the most. The money mindset is the most important, because if you don't work on that, then nothing else happens, or you're constantly sabotaging yourself.
yeah. Say more about what you're referencing there with money mindset. What do you think gets in the way for people the most with their relationship and that word sales?
Well, one of the things that I find is that people don't really believe in what they sell or what they have to offer. They don't believe that it's of value. So therefore, when they go on a sales call, they can't even name their price, or they try to get people to just work for free. And then it's just it snowballs into a disaster, because ultimately they just confirm to themselves that they're not worth paying for their services.
Yeah. I think I had this, I definitely know I had this relationship with sales that was dysfunctional and unhealthy, because I made up a story from years and years ago when I was a kid that salesmen were in place to be shisty, sell you something that you didn't need, you can't trust or believe them. So avoid them at all costs. So fast forward, now here I am owning a business, and obviously sales is a part of my business. I had to really get some clarity on what that was all about, because if I believed that to be true, then that was a reflection of me when I was selling anything that I was doing.
Mm.
So once I uncovered that kind of dynamic, with the word sales, I fired that thinking and then decided to hire that sales is really a relationship. So if I'm going to build a relationship with my client, yes, sales is going to be a part of that. And that's okay, because people buy and sell things all the time, self included. So it's okay for us to have a healthier relationship with that word.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, one of my biggest eureka moments with that too is kind of, I don't know if this is what you were saying, Sabrina, but it's what I thought was sales is still serving. And especially as a coach, when I recognize sales questions and helping creating an atmosphere to purchase, there's still coaching questions. Like
Yeah.
never once am I like, I'm gonna get you the slick answer. It's really serving them and helping them, and being okay that if it's not the right fit, I'm gonna say, then don't buy from me. This
That's
isn't
right.
right now. And so to me, it's really is about serving. So thanks.
Yeah.
Agree. Yeah.
And
How
if you
did
believe
you?
in your product, sorry, Brian,
Yeah.
like I constantly interrupt you. If you go to a friend and you tell them something about a movie, you're actually selling that movie. And when you're trying to convince your family that, you have a loved one that they should, accept, that's also selling it. But we're not thinking like that. To us, we don't connect the dots. But when we do, that's such a powerful shift, because when we understand what we're passionate about, is really what we're selling to people. When we see the solution, then the conversations becomes easier, because there's no more pressure. It's more of delivering, and those who are picking up on what we're saying, and getting that call, basically like picking up, right? Then that's what you want.
Yep.
It's much easier.
Agree. At
How
the end of
did?
the day, people they want to be helped. And if they're
Yep.
reaching out, like, what's the pain? And it's up to us in these roles, if we're coaching and consulting, like, what's the circumstance that prompted you to call? So what's the pain point? And let's figure out, what you're up against specifically. And sometimes just having that conversation and helping them self-discover and building that relationship, even if there's no financial transaction, like, that's okay. Like, there doesn't always have to be that happens, but I think there's trust that builds in the midst of that, at least from my experience, being willing to show up and support people in that way, help them uncover what's in the way. Then if we need more support, okay, here it is. Here's what the cost is. Here's what you get as a result. And here's my commitment to that. And honestly, like, I want to see them get results too.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, also, I look at a lot of no's as not yet because it might not be the right season for them.
True.
However, 2 years, 4 years from now, I know I have a coach friend that would say, I had a client who came back to me who said no, and 3 years later said, I finally saved up, I'm ready. And so often we fear the no's without recognizing what we might be doing is just planting a seed. And that's going to come out and maybe that seed never comes out, but still, like you said, if we just keep providing value and helping people, it all comes back and it all works out. It's about that season, having that nature of giving.
For sure. No doubt.
Yeah. You want to share maybe some stories about some of the work that you're doing and like what's currently happening in the world for Sabrina and what kind of work are you focusing on? Yeah.
I will say 2020, it feels like a roller coaster. Like the lows have been, significant. And like everyone, once everything really kind of opened up with COVID, and when I mean opened up, like the floodgates opened and, everything kind of shut down. There was a lot of panic and fear. And I, had a couple of Zoom meetings with some other coaches and consultants, and we were just showing up, providing services for free because people were really worried about losing work and cash flow and just, just so much uncertainty. It was vulnerability on steroids. That was the emotion. And then once that started kind of feeling normal for folks, there was still in my business not a lot of cash flow. So I was kind of wrestling with canceled events, started doing some keynotes virtually. So I was just showing up with people, trying some things on and seeing if it would go, but also preparing myself if I needed to go back to work full time. And I had that conversation with myself that was, I don't care what it is, wherever I'm needed, I'll show up. If it means a grocery store, that's where I'll go to work. It's not about trying to find this prestigious engineering related job right now. Like wherever I'm needed, this is a national emergency, I'll just go work. After 3 months of that, I didn't end up going to work anywhere. I started doing some Dare to Lead work slowly, socially distantly. And what I mean by Dare to Lead work is I will bring either intact teams together to learn the skills of courage outlined in that book called Dare to Lead, or I would bring in kind of an open enrollment group where mixed leaders from different industries would come together and we'd learn the skills together in a workshop. But I also started breaking things up in chunks. So my normal workshops are 2 days long. So I just started delivering things in 1 hour sessions, and oftentimes no charge because, again, like no one was really sure what was going to happen. So as I continued to do that, I started to really kind of lean into a lot of hard conversations in our communities, listening to a lot of what was happening with protesting and watching what was happening in our world with the issues on police brutality. And that's something that's really near and dear to my heart because I support law enforcement officers right now learning self-awareness skills. So when I say near and dear to my heart, police brutality is an issue. We've got to talk about it and we've got to figure out what that's about. And I don't have all the answers, but I do know we can't lean into hard conversations very well if we don't have good self-awareness skills. So one of the things that's been happening in the background is a program that I've been working with civilian leaders and law enforcement leaders that's really centered on developing self-awareness skills for law enforcement officers. It's very hard work. It requires a ton of vulnerability, a ton of curiosity, acknowledging what's the current state. So when I think of how do we work through a problem, any problem, we got to define where we are now and then define where we want to be and then figure out how we build bridges in between to get somewhere. So that program, building it, has been taking some time. It launches next year, and I'm incredibly excited. So that's been happening in the background. There's been a lot of for-profit and nonprofit leaders figuring out how to do training and development virtually. So as those requests come through and people say, can you do it on Zoom? I say, yeah, let's figure it out. So we just figure it out. So I'm incredibly humbled to be working and busy in a time where I didn't think I was going to be, but also really proud to watch leaders show up in this way, because executives and leaders are saying, you know what, I could cross out training and development on the P&L. I could cross out the marketing line here so we could save some cash, but they've decided to dig in and ask for some training and development. And we're doing it on Zoom. So primarily Dare to Lead work is what I'm doing. A little bit of continuous improvement work. There'll be some stuff that comes out in February with a college in Iowa. We're going to be doing 8-step problem solving through Zoom. So we're going to teach leaders how to do that through Zoom. So stay tuned.
Yeah. You know, when I hear your story in what 2020 has been, the biggest word that comes to my mind is resilience.
Yeah.
There's a bit of me who sometimes thinks organizations that want resilience is they just want people to put up with more crap without getting rid of the crap. But you're really taking resilience in the right way of, what do I do? How do I keep progressing? How do I reinvent and being adaptive? How did you get to this resilience? Or what was the thing that kept you being resilient in the last year that helped you get to, oh my gosh, I'm busier now than I ever thought I could be?
Okay, super loaded question. And
Okay.
I say super loaded in a good way because I can feel it. Like I'm having a visceral response. And that's not a bad thing. Like, we are a feeling species who occasionally thinks. Oftentimes we think that we're a thinking species who occasionally feels, but the truth is I had to unlearn a lot of that in my leadership journey, that I do have emotions. And while I was paid a lot in my roles to think and do, definitely not to feel, that was a mistake. So when I say loaded question and I feel it, you know, I have a track record of failing. So when I think about resilience, I have finally, maybe my late 40s now, but I have finally learned to start trusting myself. And I also acknowledge that I screw some things up and I fail at some things and I take risks. And when I hit the dirt, you know, face down, you know, I have a choice. I can stay there, and I have before. In my younger years, I've stayed stuck in setbacks, didn't know how to get back up. They became defining moments. And I would make up tons of stories about them and kind of get into this victim mode. And that pattern would repeat. But once I learned how to get up and acknowledge, oh, okay, well, that was a mistake. What can I learn? That doesn't define me. I can do something with that and I can show up differently. That was a skill. And then I learned how to continually do that no matter what I failed at. So if I made a mistake with a client, a friendship, a relationship with family, you know, I could apply those skills. So I would say resilience and tenacity are something that has shown up in me for years, since I was little. But it wasn't until, you know, even when I got picked to be a part of Renee's team, I remember showing up in San Antonio with the first cohort of facilitators. There were 100 of us. And I'm looking around the room and it's really loud and people are screaming because it's Brene Brown and I'm an introvert, you know, so I'm the nerd, I'm the engineer in the background, like, where are the rest of the introverts? So I sit near the back and I'm seeing people that have big names. I'm seeing people that have big titles, and I'm immediately struggling with imposter syndrome. Like, I do not belong here. I have, this kind of background. I don't have a social work background. I'm not an Air Force colonel like Colonel Halfhill. She was there. She's an amazing person, by the way. Has become a close friend. Love her dearly. But these names and titles and experiences, like, they were hitting me. Like, oh my gosh, who am I? Well, I find a seat, I'm sitting at a table, and I'm just feeling all sorts of uncomfortable. And Renee comes into the room. We were at a hotel at the time, and she says, okay, everyone, hey, tone it down. It's really loud in here. Like, we're going to have to crank it back a little bit because I'm an introvert. This is overwhelming. And then she gave us some boundaries. So she's like, here's what's okay and not okay. So she was specific about what she needed. And then we talked a little bit about being picked for the program. And essentially she told us that if we had any doubts on why we were there, it was because we had a track record of failing, but getting back up. And when I heard her say that, suddenly it carried all kinds of weight. I knew that. I knew I failed at some things. But to hear someone I considered to be a mentor say, you have a track record of failing and getting back up. I need you to help me teach leaders and organizations how to do this. That was it. Sealed the deal for me. So that's the long-winded answer of that loaded question, hence the reason I'm feeling it, because it's a personal question. Yeah.
Well, I really want to thank you because I really do believe it's really important what you just did, and being so vulnerable and open with people. And this, kind of eases the minds of a lot of people who think that they have to have it all figured out or that they can't fail in business. And, just like you said, is learning that failure is a part of the process. It's just not staying there, not giving in, and, taking responsibility for your part.
No
So
doubt.
we want to acknowledge that. So thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
Thank you for that.
Well, I also just want to acknowledge you are very consistent with what you teach. It's not teaching vulnerability for everyone else, but I'm okay. I love that you just shared that. And I also think of something that I don't know where I heard this, but it is really resonated with me, and your story just cinched it, is the most successful people also have the most failures.
Yeah.
And I think so many people don't recognize you gotta fail to succeed. So many people, we just want to keep succeeding, but that's never realistic. And if we always succeed, we're not challenging ourselves enough.
That's true. That's absolutely true. And I think some of the errors of my ways and maybe thinking and shortcomings that I had to work on. And listen, what we know from all of this research with Renee's work, specifically with her work and social work, so she interviews people on a regular basis. So she's got thousands of stories of people, and that's how she came to really understand vulnerability, courage, shame, failure. So the research is powerful, and we see ourselves in her research, like we see ourselves in her story. But the thing about the failure piece, it doesn't define our worthiness. And oftentimes, I had to look in the mirror and really wrestle with, wow, okay, I stood up, gave that presentation, and I screwed it up. I didn't say it the right way, or I took a risk on this project and it failed, or I spent a few $1,000s on this, this part that I thought was going to help improve locomotive reliability, and it didn't. Now I got to answer to the chief mechanical officer about that. Gosh, I would get stuck in this moment of I made a mistake, and it would transition to I am a mistake, which is actually shame. So I had to really get clarity that my risk-taking skills, when I made mistakes there, they didn't define my worth. I needed to really get clarity that it was okay to feel guilt about the behavior. It was not okay for me to attach my worthiness to it, because I was good enough no matter what. And still will be. All of us are. But that took a lot of work, and still does. It's a practice. I still struggle with it some days, but it's gotten better.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a part of the journey, and that's the most beautiful part. And I wish people would recognize that more, because when we do that, it just becomes so much easier. You know, we're not wrestling as hard with it.
Yeah, when I reflect back, and both of you, Kat, I'm still learning a little bit about your background. Brian, when I think about process improvement and continuous improvement, Kat, have you dabbled a little bit in CI or in the lean world a little bit, maybe with Brian?
No,
No? Okay.
I introduced her to Kaizen.
I'm from Tony Robbins. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So when we think about those types of roles, we come in kind of in a consulting role.
Mhm.
And we're working with executives. We're trying to understand, what's going on with costs. They're probably through the roof. And if you can reflect back on those experiences where, sometimes people would come in wearing all of their expert armor, these are all the things I've done. This is why I'm accomplished. It kind of prevents us from digging in and understanding what needs to be improved. And, I did the same. So one of my pieces of armor to keep myself safe was to tell people, and I joke about it now, I'm a little bit of a recovering engineer, but I would say, hi, I'm Sabrina, I'm an engineer. Because by default, what do we associate engineers with?
Smart.
Yeah. And they have all the answers, right?
Right.
Mhm.
At least I think so. My brother's an engineer, and I always looked up to him. So, he's been the brainiac in the family. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, I remember I had a mentor that had a sign on his desk that says the engineer is always right.
Mm.
So, I think in some ways we might have had a relationship like that with engineering, but I learned that, introducing myself like that kind of kept me at a distance from people. It prevented, a relationship from being built. And then by default, people are like, she already has all the answers. So there's no learning we can do here. But that was how I kept myself safe. And I had to peel that back and acknowledge, just because I'm an engineer doesn't mean I'm not going to make mistakes. I'm still going to be all right.
I'm a huge fan of Taiichi Ono, who is from the world of continuous improvement. And one of my favorite quotes, this is funny because if I would have known you I'm introducing myself as an engineer, one of my favorite quotes by him is, I'm only half right, which also means I'm half wrong. And that's why we communicate together, because that's the only way you can ever be able to see what the full truth is. And that's also why we experiment, is to be able to test whether or not we're right or wrong. So if you would have been like, I'm an engineer, like, well, you're only half right about that. So anyways, I wouldn't have been intimidated, but that's just me coming in from the Taiichi Ono perspective. So kind of fun.
Yeah.
But I totally want to have this conversation for like 2 hours now, because it started off so good. And I'm like, I cannot believe how fast this is going. So we're going to have you back. But I want to be able to let our listeners and our audience know, how can they tap into Sabrina Moon Magic? How are they going to connect with you? What's some links? How can they follow you? How can they get more?
Oh, geez. There's lots of options. So
Okay.
LinkedIn, thankful for LinkedIn. And that's how you came into my life, Brian, of course,
Yeah.
which is really cool. And LinkedIn is an opportunity. If you're on Facebook, I'm on Facebook. You can follow my company there, Problem Solving Institute, or me personally. There's an Instagram out there, but that's not as user friendly. Honestly, where I would prefer is I ask people to call on their courage, lean into some vulnerability, and send me a note. I'd rather do this, computer screen to computer screen, face to face, and talk to you, just to uncover what's in your way. I have a fun tool that I've been playing around with in the lean world. It's called the cost of poor behavior. And I snagged it from the Six Sigma kind of world, where we have that form called the cost of poor quality. So anyway, I modified it, and that's something I can share with you if you're interested in sharing it with your listeners. It's a self-awareness tool where you take an opportunity to determine all the behaviors that you might be engaging in when you're hooked by maybe a tough emotion like anger, fear, shame, disappointment. And I do all the math in the spreadsheet for you, but I'm able to calculate your cost per minute of your poor behavior when you're hooked by emotion. And when you're able to learn when you're hooked by emotion and when you're able to behave differently, actually the calculation, it's a way to determine your return on investment when you start learning self-awareness skills.
Mm.
I get that it's a little subjective, but I think it's a great place to start to determine how much money and time we spend behaving in ways outside of our awareness. It's pretty powerful. It's a vulnerable exercise, but it's powerful.
Well, and I love that what you're offering is all that part about self-awareness. And yeah, maybe you can argue with the numbers, but the main thing is it starts to point you towards a direction. And that's what I think is amazing and really cool. So yeah, if you want to just send us the link, we'll make sure that's on the YouTube and it's going to be part of when you listen to this show. If you just click on the show notes, we'll be able to do that. And we also want to invite our audience. Feel free to join we have a Facebook group just for this podcast where Kat and I can interact, or listeners can interact. You can start having conversations how you could be vulnerable or share your process of self-awareness. And that truly, really is, especially the farther I've gone in the realm of success, self-awareness is where it all begins, and it's the root of everything. Like even when I did my coaching program, when you want to know how do I help people, they go, well, it's going to start with you. Like, well, no, I'm learning to. Oh wait, we have to have that self-awareness. So anyways, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that really is Kaizen, isn't it, Brian?
Yep. Well, one of the things is a little sidebar between my normal wrap up. So I did a lot of study on what respect for people actually means to Toyota. And there's a lot of people who just talk about it in general, but one of the key pieces, there's actually 5 elements, and one of them is self-responsibility, which to me is self-awareness. And I think so often we think Kaizen and improvement is someone else, but it's always asking what is our role in it. And even some of the work that I do with leaders who will come up and say, oh my gosh, this bad employee is so bad. Look what I inherited. What do I do with this bad employee? I say, well, what is it about your leadership that caused that? Because if you take as a leader that self responsibility, you show up different.
Yes.
And you might have this person, but you will create more of those people unless you take that self-responsibility. And you'd be like, everywhere I go, I have idiots. Well, let's take a look and see what's doing that. Because it's probably not your hiring process, because you're always impressed with people when they start.
Right.
But something happens.
Yeah.
Anyways, like
No,
I said,
it is the hardest thing to look at yourself, and it's much easier to blame it on someone else.
Right.
Or see it in someone else, I should say.
Right.
Yeah. So subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you can't stand looking at us, go and listen to our audio show. We would love just to continue to connect with you. Thank you, everybody, and we will see you next time. Thank you.